Okay, good evening, everybody. This is the first regularly scheduled meeting of the planning board in 2025. It's 6:03 p.m. on January 16th, 2025. I am Mike Capuano. I'm the chairman of the planning board. With me tonight is our vice chair, Amelia Aboff, our clerk, Jahan Habib, and our members, Michael McNeely and Luke Schuster. With that, we have a quorum to be able to take up all items of business that are before the board. Pursuant to Chapter 2 of the Acts of 2023, this meeting of the planning board is being conducted via remote participation. A video recording of the proceedings will be available on the city's website or by emailing planning@somervillema.gov. This meeting is being recorded, and we have a number of items on our agenda this evening. The first is an approval of minutes from December 5 and also December 19 of 2024. Has everybody had the opportunity to review the draft meeting minutes of December 5? And does anybody have any comments or questions or revisions for that? Seeing none, the chair moves to adopt the draft meeting minutes of December 5, 2024, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we have a roll call?
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye. We have meeting minutes for December 5. Same for December 19. Has everybody had the opportunity to review the draft meeting minutes? Does anybody have any suggested revisions? Okay, seeing none, the chair moves to adopt the draft meeting minutes from December 19th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we have a roll call?
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
All right, we have meeting minutes. We also have a request from 45 Mystic Avenue for leave to withdraw their application without prejudice. Chair moves to accept the request for withdrawal without prejudice. That's a difficult sentence to say. Does anybody have any comments or questions before Amelia seconds it? Amelia seconds that motion to withdraw. Can we please have a roll call?
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye, that item is withdrawn without prejudice. Next item on the agenda is 720 to 722 Broadway. They have requested a continuance to Feb 6, and it's my understanding that the applicant is present to make that request tonight. If so, they could please be unmuted and made a present.
This is Steve Carey. I believe I just promoted Christopher Vance.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Okay, yeah, thanks. We are here to ask for continuation to the February 6th planning board meeting for both applications.
Okay. Anybody have any comments or questions for the applicant or staff on this? Okay. Seeing none, because there are two separate applications, we are going to have two separate votes. So the first one is going to be on the special permit, which is ZP 24-00047. Chair moves to continue that to Feb 6, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we have a roll call?
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye. The agenda item is continued to February 6. Next is the site plan approval at ZP 24-00048. Chair moves to continue that agenda item to the 6th of February, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can we roll call?
Luke Schuster.
Aye.
Jahan Habib.
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
Amelia Aboff.
Aye.
And Michael Capuano.
Aye. That agenda item is continued. Thank you very much. We'll see you in a few weeks.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
You too. Bye.
Um, next item up is 20 to 23 Cummings Street, which has already been open. Presentation by the applicant and the applicant's team has been made. Testimony, both oral and written, has been given and submitted. Initial discussion at least, has been made by the planning board. So I would welcome the applicant and their team to be unmuted and have their screen shared or whatever they determine necessary.
Sure, this is Steve Carey. I am promoting Anthony Galuccio, Ryan Souls, Christina Audette, and let's see, there may have been one other. I'm just looking over our list of participants here, as well as let's see, there's 3 people promoted right now. Anthony, are you waiting for anyone else to be promoted?
Yeah, let me just look. Did you promote Erica from VHB?
Yep, I'll do that right now.
Brian Dugdale, Ryan, Pat Duniford
Pat
from
Dunford,
VHB. Is Pat on?
Yep, I see them. I just promoted him as well as Brian and Erica.
I think that's all I would anticipate for this evening.
Okay,
Okay.
sure. So thank you.
Hi, Mr.
Attorney-
Chair. Welcome back, everybody.
Thanks, Attorney Galuccio. So between the last time we met and today, a few more materials were submitted. And we have some formal feedback from the mobility division on some of the proposed conditions we had discussed the last time. So before we move on with some of the shadow study issues, at least that were presented, I'd like to invite planning staff, Andrew, to join us and relay what mobility's status has been. I know the planning board has received it, but the public might not have.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I just want to note that Justin Stryver from the Mobility Division is present here, and he
Oh,
could
great.
provide that update to the board. So,
You know what?
Justin,
Let's do that instead.
I invite you to chime in. Thank you very much.
Hey, Justin, I'm sorry, I didn't see you there.
That's all right. Good evening. Yes, I think, I'm happy to talk about anything in more detail, but I think the summary is mobility is comfortable sticking with the conditions, as we propose them.
Okay.
And we understand there's opposition to a couple of those things, and happy to talk about anything in more detail that pleases the board.
Justin, so I have a couple of questions, and they relate both to this. I don't know the degree to which you're able to speak kind of more broadly about some of the questions that I have, because I think this might be a bigger conversation that might require that this application be continued for a little bit so we can get some feedback from the city. But one of the concerns that mobility raised was the amount of parking that was on this site. Is that an appropriate way of categorizing one of the concerns?
Correct. Amount of parking, especially in relation to the street network that it's supported by.
Okay. Can I ask if that was viewed somewhat in isolation as it relates specifically to this application, or was that viewed more broadly with some of the other, with the street network that it both exists already around the site, in and around other buildings that are either permanent or built, or that might come before us sometime in the future? For example, I'm thinking the mall, right? So the root of this question is, okay, so there's too much parking in mobility's position on this particular property right now. Is that concern more of a global concern as to how vehicles will move through and around this site and the surrounding immediate area within that area of Assembly Square, or this particular property, period?
Um, yeah, I think I can answer the question by saying a couple things. One is that projects that have been previously permitted, especially as you go back further in time, certainly have more parking relative to the size of their project. And it's definitely true that we in mobility are trying to push projects to see if they can do with less parking in general. But our recommendation is really just based on the facts of this proposal, the really, really limited street network that exists to support, like extremely limited, as in a pair of 200-foot long, one block side streets, and the intensity of use in such a small area. So it's primarily about the facts on this site, although it's definitely an important piece of context that there is quite a large amount of commercially available parking in the Assembly Square neighborhood.
Right. I mean, I'm not going to push back too hard, but the parking that's available right now that I'm familiar with in this area at least is on the other side of the mall, which means you have to go right now. If the building was to be built tomorrow, you'd have to walk all the way around the mall to get to your car, or all the way over to one of the other developed blocks in Assembly, or all the way over to the Mass General lot, which is not exactly conducive to being accessible to this particular property. I'm wondering, and I don't know if you know, is are we looking at some sort of a central parking facility in this area, either where the mall is or something that would serve this section of Assembly kind of more broadly? Because as I think about the Assembly Square district, we've got, a couple of big garages, right? You got the big Mass General lot. You've got the big lots within some of the buildings that are on the other side of the mall. And then you get the big surface lot in front of the mall, which I anticipate at some point is probably going to be going away and becoming something else. So I'm wondering if there is some sort um, of a plan to be able to handle all of the traffic and all of the parking in this section of Assembly specifically, such that if we come to the point where we're asking this particular applicant, look, you need to reduce the parking on your site because we know that another 2 or 3 buildings are going to come in that are going to put in, 1,000 spots to mitigate everything that's going on. So they're not bearing the entire brunt of this area. Is that something that we could look at doing? Because what I don't want to do is have this particular area be underserved and make people walk 15 minutes, 20 minutes across Assembly Square to get to, their hotel or something. I mean, that's a little silly.
Chair, I think the most relevant ones to this project could be at the Assembly Innovation Park, which is actually essentially on the same block as this project, the corner of Middlesex and Foley. It's a 1,200 space garage, and permitted at a ratio multiple times greater than this project. And there's also the property directly next door, 74 Middlesex Ave, not occupied yet, but will also have a couple hundred spaces. I don't have the exact number on hand. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there are a large number of commercially available spaces in close proximity.
Mr. Chair,
And
can
I
sorry, go ahead.
would again reiterate that the recommendation is not based on that. It's based on the particulars of the site.
Okay. Then in that case, my question and my wouldn't say concern necessarily. My inquisitiveness is piqued because here, what it seems like mobility is saying is we are concerned with and have an interest in placing a cap on this particular site because we do not think that they need this much parking at this particular site. And that seems to be in contrast with the guidance that mobility gave in support of the zoning amendment that we made a recommendation on a few weeks ago to remove minimum parking requirements throughout the city, because according to what mobility said in that application was, we trust developers to build what they think they're going to need. They're either going to build, nothing if they don't think they need it, or they're going to build what they think they're going to need. So in one circumstance, it looks like mobility is believing developers and saying, we buy, to build what you want and what you think you need. And in this circumstance, it seems to be saying the opposite is, thank you for telling me what you need. We don't agree with you and we don't like it. So I'm trying to square that.
Chair, I guess I'd respond by saying that the parking maximum is just that. It's a maximum. And most of our concern is based on the traffic analysis that was submitted, which showed, 3/4 long mile queues from project traffic on a street that's only 200 feet long.
Mhm.
And it concerns us to think that traffic is going to be circling down into a garage. And really it's the impact on non-motorized modes of travel especially when that's proposed to come out on, a side street with a stop sign. I think you can imagine what would happen with the excessive amount of people trying to exit when they wouldn't be able to. You're going to see frustration and safety issues.
At least on the ingress, and the queuing, you mentioned a 3/4 mile long backup, right? Is that based on, as I understand the mobility comment, based on the valet proposal that they have with the hotel?
So that number is from the traffic impact study. Um, the current way that works is that has no connection to the parking number. That's based on a trip generation number, like an industry standard number that takes the square footage. And I'm sure Pat Tenford could go through the details, but a multi-step process to come up with the number of vehicle trips a certain amount of space would generate, data collection at that intersection, adding those trips, and modeling software that determines, that's the 95th percentile queue. That's, the queues as bad as they would get.
Okay. So in the absence of taking the recommendation by simply saying, let's just remove what the applicant determines is necessary for their site to work, is there another avenue by which mobility's concerns for queuing can be mitigated? I know Amelia and I had a discussion offline about some potential ideas that, it was just the two of us, so there's no open meeting law concern, that might mitigate it. And I'm wondering if you might be able to raise, if you still share that comment, Amelia, some of your thoughts on the issue, because I thought they were, very well thought out, as they always are.
I was wondering if you could expand on sort of the impact from anticipated from queuing into the garage itself versus the impact from the valet space operation. My thought was that perhaps if we thought that the valet spaces were having a disproportionate impact, that we might be able to appeal to the applicant to take another look at their garage design and see if they might be able to accommodate sort of fully internal circulation for the valet operation, in order to keep the impacts of that from impacting the above grade street grid.
Yeah, I guess it's not specifically about the valet operations, although I will say I question how a valet can operate when there's queues backing up like through a garage. I don't know how that would operate, and I wonder how that can be operated safely. I think the recommendation not to permit the valet spaces was based on the idea that the applicant proposed that those spaces would go away at some point in the undetermined future. And I think our recommendation is based on a desire to reduce the amount of parking on the site, to reduce the trip generation, to reduce the travel demand. It's not specifically something about the valet, although there are questions certainly, but we're not saying that valet could not work at this location.
So if we were at a total space count of, I'm sorry, I don't have the number in front of me, 738 rather than the 900, and 200 of those were valet, you wouldn't have an operational concern with that. It's not the valet operation, it's just the total.
Yeah, I think we'd like to see more detail on how the valet would operate, but it's likely a problem that can be solved.
Thank you.
Most of the questions I think I had for you, Justin. I don't know if other members of the board have questions specifically for you. I see Luke.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. Just one question that occurred to me as I was listening to the back and forth you were having is, if the traffic study was done agnostic to the parking that's being proposed, just using industry standard assumptions, maybe this ultimately wouldn't shift things dramatically anyway, but even the 900-ish total with the valet spots, that level of parking for a project this size is much lower than would be industry standard for a project this size, right? So is it possible that actually, in a way, the traffic study is likely on the high end of the estimate of the amount of traffic that would happen given the negotiation we're having right now?
Mobility definitely acknowledges that it's a conservative analysis. I think, this board has seen many, many instances of our division not being concerned when we see, degradations in vehicular level of service. But it's sort of the size and scale of what we're seeing here is like to a degree that we can't really ignore it. So it is absolutely a conservative analysis. It is on the most conservative end of what can happen. And a lot of the conditions you've seen proposed about promoting alternative modes of transportation, reducing the parking, the intent is to make sure that that analysis doesn't actually come to fruition. Hope that answered your question. It's certainly conservative. I think we tend not to discount when we see things like that, but when we see a level of service like A to F or B to F and extremely long queues, it's some cause for concern. And again, if folks want to sit in traffic, like that's fine. Our concern is how it degrades the public realm. That's really what it comes down to. Because the project is limited to such a small street network. Like the traffic we're talking about is not going to impact the broader street network. When the analysis looked at the broader street network, the McGrath Boulevard intersections, the Fellsway intersections, the impacts are not as severe, right? We're talking about the impacts on the sites, the streets specifically surrounding the site.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah, of course.
Sorry, and I wanted to thank Justin. We've worked cooperatively for a long time on this, and a lot of the things that we've agreed to were in response to concerns like signalization. We don't love having Cummings be a one-way, but we've agreed to do that if study shows that that's the right thing to do. So we're trying to address a landlocked sort of site with high density, and we want to lease it out. I mean, the goal is to have it be competitive with places like Alewife and Arsenal Square, which are coming in above a 0.8 in parking. So we're well below with valet at a 0.65. We're in a little bit of a danger zone in terms of competition. I do want to point out 74 Middlesex, which is also Greystar's site. That's a 0.7. So that's also low. We think that's going to be leased out. And the concern would be that 5 Middlesex, when it's leased, it's going to be a different ball game. And as you said, Mr. Chairman, if those dry up, you are into a pretty significant walk. But remember, Schuster, you raised a fascinating question that took me a lot longer than it did you to figure out, which is that the traffic experts don't necessarily agree on impacts. So you should probably be in my job, and I don't know if I deserve yours, because it took me a while to figure that one out. And after a while, I asked Pat, I don't understand the disconnect here. And, Pat, our consultant's feeling is it is a very, very, very conservative study. So when you look at the conservative nature of the study and you look at the mitigation, the signalization, Cummings, we've also bolstered some of the PDTM measures that we had planned to offer, Mr. Chair, shuttle and passes. We do want to aggressively get folks out, but the goal here, just as a reminder, was to get the city to a 0.5. So we didn't want to build physically more than a 0.5. because we knew that was sort of the line. So the valet was within the structure so that it could be taken away. We don't have any love for valet. You know, we did it because we wanted to provide parking that could be reduced down the road. It was an effort to you know, come to agreement with the city. I don't know if it's helpful to have, you know, Pat from VHB say a few words. He's the expert, and I think, you know, Justin's been great and honest that there's a little bit of an agreement of disagreement. But Pat, is Pat on?
Pat is on.
Hi, Pat.
Hi there. So, good evening, Pat Dunford, transportation engineer with VHB. I agree with the comments Justin just offered. It was a nice summary of what we just talked about. Some background, or I guess a little more detail on it. I agree it's not so much the valet operation that was the concern, but it was the traffic generated by the garage. And being that it's a commercial garage, it's not just this project, it's the area as a whole. So, like he said, we estimated traffic based on the standard ITE data, which you've probably heard in the past. And we assume a certain amount's taking the T, a certain amount's biking and walking. When we do that, we still end up with about 90% of the garage exiting at once at 5 in the afternoon, where in reality, it's typically closer to 30%. Not everyone leaves at the same time. But there's a little bit of a disconnect because we have so little parking, I guess might be the phrasing. There's a little bit of a disconnect where we're estimating traffic generation based on the building size and not on the parking facility, which is throttling that down. Now, rules being what they are, we still did the traffic study that way. And we were showing some pretty excessive queues on both Cummings and McGrath Highway. Through his comments on that, we went back, looked at it again, and I think as a group came up with the idea that signalization, in my opinion, is the best way to deal with that being a new signal at McGrath Highway's intersection with Middlesex Avenue. And we had showed that briefly, I think, at our December hearing. I believe there was also some discussion and a willingness on this project's part, if everyone decides 2 signals makes more sense, we put in 2 signals, one at Cummings, one at McGrath. Personally, I think the McGrath signal can handle the situation, but ultimately that's for everyone to decide on what it would be. So the queues that were mentioned assume just a stop sign at the end of McGrath, and you're still going to have long delays under any scenario, but I think the signal controls it. Also has the added benefit of providing an avenue for pedestrians to cross Middlesex Avenue under signalized control, as well as bikes being incorporated into the signal. So, you know, we have more information on that tonight, but I guess in summary, we definitely agree that there were some inflated queue results, and regardless of what the exact number is, we have to mitigate that, and I think signalizing it's the best way. And the parking, I know we'll discuss more tonight, but I think we have gone with a minimalist approach, relatively speaking, to other lab projects in the area. So we can talk about that some more. Happy to take any questions, or if there's anything I missed, be happy to expound on it.
I don't want to speak for my fellow board members here. I'm just asking this as a hypothetical. If you heard from us that we were unlikely to accept your request for the increased parking volume with the information as it stands tonight, would going back and taking a closer look at the parking analysis with not the conservative ITE numbers, but the numbers that are actually being proposed for the project and what it would look like with the signalization mitigation in place, is that a study that would be a reasonable time and cost to do to get an updated grasp on this? Because I understand the perspectives that, you know, the professionals have agreed to disagree, but our professionals are on the conservative side, so I'm trying to figure out how we work through that.
Yeah. From one who pays his mortgage through traffic studies, I'll certainly never object to doing more work. I can tell you on an initial basis, we did take a look at this. And internally, not published, but we knocked down the numbers to closer to what we think is reality. Justin had the number off the top of his head, but I think the unsignalized was something like a half-mile queue, which is beyond excessive. If you adjust it based on the garage size, it's still going to be long. It still might back up into the garage entrance, but we found that the signal appeared to be able to mitigate that. You've probably heard other projects in the past where we do the level of service discussion, which is kind of an outdated idea, but it's how efficiently traffic vehicular is processed, best being A, worst being F. We'll probably still end up at a level of service E or a level of service F, even with the signal, which isn't unusual. But the priority remains making sure people can physically walk across the street, they can bike through it, and we still process traffic, just not instantly. So behind the scenes, we did that math, and obviously we've shown a concept of a signal, but Justin has not seen any real detailed backup onto that as far as design, which will be the next phase of operation here. So I think I know the answer you're suggesting. I just don't know if we need to get into that just yet, given that we're going to do a full design process for the signal.
And do we know what the impact of a second signal would be?
That I did not look at. The volumes as we saw them, given the garage placement and where people would be going, Cummings, and I'm really focused mostly on the afternoon because that's when everyone's exiting, and that's when you'll see those excessive backups if they do occur. McGrath Highway was going to be carrying the bulk of the volume. So I think with a new signal at McGrath that stops traffic on Middlesex Avenue at certain times, when the pedestrians are crossing, it stops it in all directions. I think you'd be able to get people in and out of Cummings Street by that de facto stoppage of traffic at McGrath. It's going to stop traffic further north at Cummings. Not all of it, but some of it. Regardless of my own personal thoughts, as a group, we're committed to doing 2 signals if everyone wants 2 signals. And they'd definitely be coordinated, giving the close spacing, and they'd also be tied into the larger signal system with an assembly square. So I think we can go either way. It just needs that design process to be undertaken.
Thank you for those explanations. That was very helpful. And I'd just like to share for the benefit of my fellow board members. One concern that I'm attuned to here is not actually whether folks who are sitting in traffic are getting where they need to go at a level of service B or F, but the amount of additional sort of idling time that is created by all of these vehicles being stuck in traffic in a neighborhood that, one, is already very sensitive to this development, and 2, is sort of among the most, environmental justice issue communities given the existing air pollution from McGrath Highway, and sort of trying to create a situation where we're not doubling down on that in order to accommodate. Thank you.
Does anybody else have any discussion on this particular issue while we have Justin still? I think I saw Michael's hand. Did I?
I can wait. My question doesn't necessarily require Justin to be here if somebody else has a more timely.
Maybe.
Mr. Chair,
Mhm.
I did, Justin's been transparent about sort of where they want to hold the bar. We are open to conversation around the details of the goal of the utilization review is to have the city have a mechanism to reduce that parking. I think, in fairness, Justin is holding sort of on that the bulk parking as it relates to valet, but we are open to conversations about the valet operations and the methodology in which we would be conveying information to the city and how we tie PDTM measures to efforts to reduce that valet number so that number can go down. I know it's not exactly aligned with what Justin would like, but we are open to those conversations.
What I'd like then, I appreciate that. Because I don't think, we're going to be taking a vote on this tonight, right? I think there's too much kind of in flux. I think there are questions that still need to be answered. One of the ones that I have is not necessarily one that Justin can answer, but maybe maybe Dan or Sarah Lewis or somebody, is what the idea for this neighborhood is going to be as it relates, or Andrew, as it relates to what other available, parking facilities will be local to this site, such that maybe you don't have to bear the entire burden of having everybody on Cumming Street and McGrath Highway, and there could be different places that could service the needs of people in this region in the next, buildings that might be permitted in the next, 3, 5, 10 years. So sorry, Andrew. I welcome everything you have to say in the way of insight.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair, thank you. I was able to speak with Senior Planner Lewis to discuss the draft Assembly Square plan in terms of, is there anything that actually details parking in the marketplace, other nearby sites sort of in this area of Assembly. And the plan doesn't. And that's for a reason. The plan wanted to focus more on design and sort of outcome rather than parking numbers. Most of the mobility related elements of the Assembly Square plan are having to do with more pedestrianization, bike lanes, road design rather than parking. We do anticipate, though, other projects down the road that will replace the marketplace. The associated development with 5 Middlesex, there's other buildings that are planned as part of that development. And Justin may have more details. I am not sure if they're going to have more parking garages, but we can anticipate that there will be some sort of parking in the marketplace. It most likely will not be a parking lot, surface parking lot, but it will be a similar type of garage that the applicant is proposing. I hope that answers your question. I know it's not as detailed. That's how it's laid out in the plan.
No, I can't. And thank you very much. I can't
You're
imagine
welcome.
there's going to be detail to the level that we really would need to assess this. But the fact that there is certainly a plan going forward such that there will be other facilities in the immediate area that might be able to absorb the impact that's not just focused on this particular applicant's site is helpful to think about.
And if it's also helpful, Mr. Chair, you can anticipate in the future there being a new overlay district in Assembly that will replace the current zoning. So it will be handled like Boynton Yards in terms of how the permitting works with master plan development. So there'll be more specifics in the zoning when that comes after the adoption of the plan.
Okay, and Andrew, for the benefit of me for sure, but probably other people too. When you say that, as I recall how we looked at Boynton with an overlay, we were looking at regional needs and district needs as opposed to site needs. Is that what you're getting at?
I anticipate that we'll having a lot of conversations with the mobility division around how we handle parking numbers in Assembly. I don't want to theorize how exactly. I wasn't around when we did Boynton, so I don't have that information, but I do anticipate there'll be a process which will heavily involve Justin and his team.
Okay. All right. I think there's certainly things that we should think about as it relates to this. Is there anything else that people want to bring up, Michael, on this issue? I know that we have other issues we want to talk about too, and I know you said you might not at this point, but if you do on this, let's go.
Yeah. No, I definitely do on this topic. I just meant Justin, if he needs to go, that's okay. Two questions. First was, could the applicant talk a little bit about their efforts to work with neighbors to potentially meet some of their parking needs by, say, maybe leasing out spaces or things like that?
Yeah, we can certainly pull up the map to just give you a better visual. One of the challenges is, and I don't want to sound like a leasing agent, but ultimately those folks, and often they are overly conservative. So I'm not saying that they are to be trusted at every word, but ultimately this will come down to, as all of you know, there will be a lab tenant that's looking at Fresh Pond, the Quad, Alewife Park, Arsenal. And they'll look at, I think we have amazing buildings. We've had the best architects. I think we have great teams. What's the build form of the building? Can it deliver an awesome lab? Then they'll look at how soon can you deliver it? They'll look at rent and they'll look at parking. And so the ability to be able to convey tangible number of lease spaces is going to be a competitive challenge. We already face the issue of our parking is open to the public. Not that, 300 people are going to stream in to park there in order to go work at North Station, but we already have the challenge of saying, we can't promise you the parking. You're on your own. So getting into hypothetical leases, which we don't know how many or when or what might exist. You also have the challenge of if I'm Biomed, I'm not going to commit 200 spaces to us when they're fishing for the same tenants we are, to be honest, right? So they don't want to be in a position where they can't deliver on a parking lease either. So it's very speculative as to what excess may or may not be. And so I think it was Justin's acknowledged, even though I think if our number with a number across assembly, mobility would be ecstatic. If everyone was at a 0.65, there's a sense that there's some excess out there and we want to reel it in. I don't know what that real number is, or whether it's proximate. I don't think there's any way we could get a sense of it now, because legally, whether they can do a long-term bulk lease is one question, because some of them are under the same restrictions we are in terms of committing bulk leases. So a lot of this stuff is becoming juxtaposed, because like the other interesting one is I am absolutely not at Pat's level, never will be. I've just been trying to figure out how to mitigate. And I'm like, well, if we give a financial incentive to a service employee or to an admin to go park in another garage, that wouldn't make a lot of sense either, because we want them potentially on the T. So now we're giving you a financial incentive to drive into Somerville to go to a different garage, but it still impacts the neighborhoods, as Amelia said. So a lot of this stuff starts to get in conflict. I do feel like the ultimate sort of measure is ratio, and we're on the really aggressively low side of that. This isn't, as many of you know, this isn't the first location where there's lab where you have E and F intersections. And in those places, most neighborhoods want to see progress and they want to see development progress. They don't want to stop everything because pass-through driving gridlocks adjacent roadways and highways. They just want you to do it thoughtfully, and wherever possible, make improvements through signalization and mitigation and so forth. So like, this isn't a unique condition. I do wonder if you have guidance for us, like if you want us to present more at a future meeting, or like what can we look at and think about to present more of at a future meeting to try to move this along. To answer your question succinctly, 5 Middlesex would be, Justin and I are sort of Jedi brothers, gender neutral at this point. Like, I know what he would say, which is 5 Middlesex. 74 is too low to expect excess. We're at a 0.7. But again, when that's leased up, all bets are off. So again, I'm trying to permit something that can be competitive from a leasing standpoint, or else it's not worth permitting.
Yeah, and I'm trying to get there with you. I think I'm just trying to get a better sense of the amount of creativity you put into the problem, right? Like last meeting, I brought up other ideas that have been discussed by this board, including shuttle buses and things like that, right? So I just want to get more perspective from you on what homework you've done to say that this really is the only solution.
Thank you.
And if it's not, and you do need to explore those things like that, that could be something that you do before the next meeting. For example.
Can I show you? Because I have labored over that, and that was one of the, like, I can't make the traffic analysts agree, but I've been trying to bolster those. Christine or Erica, can you pull up the PDTM Michael, that was exactly what I went back and asked. It's like, if I'm the city, you're asking me to buy into a utilization study, but what are the things you're going to do to make that utilization go down so we can reduce the parking? So one of the things we did, we had a shuttle, but it was just for hotel. We lost that. So we added that to the commercial or R&D tenants. We can sort of talk about the scope of that. Also, we've limited it to 2.5% exclusively for tenants. Pat, what was that number before?
I think that's what Mobility had requested of us, but it
Okay,
goes
we
back to
just-
the point, this is a commercial garage, so we can only reserve 2.5% of the spaces specifically for our tenants. So if there's any neighbors or other people that wish to park in this garage, it's a public garage, they can do so.
Yeah. I don't have to read through them. 100% of MBTA. This is a robust PDTM package. You know, it's kind of like as good or better than I've ever seen. You know, 3 blue bike stations. And if you folks have any additional, we've sort of been stuck on this sunset, so we haven't engaged with Mobility has been resistant to sort of negotiate over things like this, Michael, because, you know, they were firm on the sunset. So I've been challenging the team to do math by addition, and this is sort of where we are now, but we're open to other suggestions as well.
Yeah, I mean, as one member, I'm just kind of digesting some of this for the first time, but I think it's great. I really appreciate that you guys are trying to come at this from another angle. So thank you for spending time on this. I did have one additional question, Mr. Chair, if you don't mind.
Don't mind at all.
Okay. So this one is kind of following up on your discussions around a building that is financeable and that can get, you know, tenants in. How sensitive are you to if this board were inclined to approve the space count as proposed? How sensitive would you be to a automatic reduction after X period of time, with the possibility to expand it and maintain the current volume after coming back to either the planning board or some other review group to kind of take a step back and look at what the impact has actually been? To me, this would allow you to potentially get the building financed. And if the impact really isn't that material to the community, then it should be easy 3 years from now to be able to either come to us or Mobility and say, look, it's been fine over here. And then the board should readily, you know, approve the extension of using that number of parking spaces going forward. Do you think that that's something that can make this project make sense?
So you're
Michael, can I do you mind, Michael, do you mind if I just clarify the question?
Sure.
'Cause I think I totally agree with you on this. Is looking at, because we had talked about a sunset provision on certain uses, right? That would sunset. I think it was 5 years, right? So if we say, okay, we're going to sunset it after 5 years, but after 3, you know, some shorter period of time, we want the applicant to return to us with a report on actual usage prior to the sunset period to see if it makes sense to either extend the sunset period for another period of time if they're maxed out and continually using what they've got, or in the alternative, if they're not using the spaces or whatever, accelerate the sunset. Is that what you're proposing?
It's kind of what I'm getting at. And it's not just are they using them, is the impact to the neighborhood enough that we need to speed things up and mitigate it, essentially.
I love that idea as one person.
Is that financeable? Would that get you to a point where you feel like you could build a project?
Mike, and so you again, my scenario where a lab tenant for a 500,000, maybe let's say we have the golden ticket. This will be a good problem, right? If we're getting anchor lab tenants at Assembly, and they're looking at, again, the Quad, Alewife Park, maybe Kendall. I don't know if we're competitive with Kendall. Maybe we are. You know, the density, I think you guys have done a great job of putting labs in play that can be competitive. But now you say to a tenant, you're at a 0.65, which could get reduced by the devil's in the details, by how much, based on what, within a, I don't know, a 20-year lease period with 10-year extensions. Like it's costing like 1,300 square foot to build lab now. So you're into this stuff really deep, right? So I'm assuming these lab leases are 20 with 10s. The lower the exposure is, the better, right? In terms of what you lose. I get the sense of wanting to, for not just our project, for Assembly in general, to get a sense of like where things are. And I think to Pat's point, like what hours, like we have places in Cambridge that are just absolutely nightmares at rush hour, but you don't go there at rush hour. Like you'd rather have development in progress than shut it down and just avoid it. I don't think, you know, rush hour is going to be rush hour. I guess the question is how much and when. I'd love to get through that first lease period where you get tenants comfortable and loving Assembly before you tell them they're going to take a hit, where it would make a difference in, which would where it would put us in a competitive disadvantage with a lease. Do you see what I'm saying? So like, what's the amount that isn't negligible or they can't, I don't mean hold against us in terms of money. I mean, in terms of going somewhere else.
I just want to thank Michael for his creative thinking and efforts to sort of come up with a potential solution to this problem here. I think we hear you loud and clear that you want what you want, and that's come across, I think, quite clearly. But I think you're hearing from at least some of us that we haven't yet come up with a mechanism that makes us comfortable with that. So if everyone could try to think a little bit creatively like Michael, I think a sunset that doesn't kick in for 20 years is unlikely to pass the muster of this board, if I had to guess. So, you know, waiting until the end of a full lease term is probably, I would venture, not the solution that we're headed towards here.
No, I get it. And I guess tonight was the first opportunity we've had to have an exchange with mobility in front of the board. So I wouldn't be doing my job if maybe I wasn't successful in making the case that we're not happy at a 0.65. We don't love the valet. We don't like Cummings as a one-way. I don't think we love paying for two signals, but that's just money, and that money is tied to occupancy. So I was going into this from the standpoint of Member Eboff, that neither side would be happy, not that we want what we want. We've really, like, and I think, Mr. Chair, you raised it, like, we probably have to go back to investors and say, does this work? Because we're
Just wait till I have, just wait till the next round of questions, Anthony.
And I was going to say, are we going to agree that you may start to see some of the same outfits at the next few meetings? Because I don't have many different suits if we're going to come back 2 or 3 more times. So in terms of clothing, Michael, can you just tell me exactly what you're proposing so I can just really dial down on it?
I don't know if I have a formal proposal here. I think I'm still asking questions to see if you have ideas at the moment. But when I like put my cards on the table here, I really like a lot of the parts of this project, right? I am not inherently against having additional parking here, right? You've heard folks describe that this could be potentially a resource for the neighborhood, right? So that's great to have that extra parking there instead of having to build more of it in the future. All good things. I also generally have the disposition of wanting to reduce cars and parking in general, but again, I'm not opposed to having a higher volume, especially when there's an obvious market need for it, right? For a certain ratio of the lab space. I'm supportive of all that. The part I'm worried about is the impact to the local area. And if we're getting very clear direction from the experts that this is going to impact the surrounding, community, that's what I'm concerned about, right? And so that's why I'm, bringing up the idea of trying to rein it in early, so that if there actually is an impact, and what you're saying is that the analysis is too conservative and we shouldn't, fully lean into it, that we have the controls to fix the problem quickly. I don't
Okay.
want to spend the next, 20 years with a massive traffic problem here.
I got it. And so is that like, let me just throw, I don't want to be, let's just say it's 3 years after occupancy of all the commercial buildings. Is that, and let's just say it's a 25% increase, or maybe there's a range for, the reduction. Is there also an opportunity to say, like, not so bad and we still need it? Like, we were right, the numbers were super conservative. It's not pleasant to at 5 o'clock, it's not pleasant, but bikes and pedestrians are safe. People can cross, and I wouldn't want to leave at 5 if I worked there. To Amelia, to your point, like, we're not trying to make this convenient, but it's okay. It's working. So is it a chance also for us to say it's working as we thought it would, and we don't think we need a reduction?
Yeah, I think absolutely. If the neighborhood is not being impacted, I would definitely welcome an extension, right?
Well, when you say neighborhood, that do you mean Middlesex? Do you mean the highway?
Yeah, the surrounding streets that we're currently worried about there being significant queuing.
And if Cummings, that's a whole nother piece of this that we'll know then, because Cummings forces everything to one side. We like having two egresses, but that would be known at that point at the study. So that would all get vetted. I mean, I guess we'd have to take that back. I'm thinking the least burdensome version of that is a percentage of the valet. So, like, if the tenant knows they can only lose so much, but they may not lose it if things are working okay. And so, like, sorry, go ahead. I don't want to interrupt.
This is a very productive conversation. I was just going to ask whether Patrick or Justin, as our experts here, might have recommendations on what study we would do, what would effectively measure the impacts that Michael's trying to understand here, because I think we're grasping at straws not without your expertise.
I could start, and Justin certainly could supplement it. As far as background, the MMP, Mobility Management Plan approval, Somerville is always very good about requiring post-opening traffic monitoring, and that's in the form of annual parking counts, and I think it's biannual garage entrance and exit counts. The point being, regardless of this discussion tonight, we're already taking a look at this site immediately after it opens in perpetuity. I always love saying that word, but we're going to be looking at it continually after it opens. Separate from this project, the TMA, Assembly Connect, when we did the signals out here, probably, 15 years ago now, we set those up with automatic traffic counting capabilities. So the TMA, I believe, is monitoring Assembly Square as a whole, all the way down to Lombardi, all the way up to Grand Union Boulevard and the Medford side. So it's being looked at, this project, site-specific at the garage and the parking, and globally, the TMA is looking at it. So there's a continuous revisiting of traffic out here. How we tie that to the parking, and if it stays, if it goes, that needs further discussion. But I just wanted everyone to be aware those post-opening studies are happening regardless of what we're talking about.
Yeah, I think there could be something there potentially, and I would be less interested in the utilization and more interested in what's happening at the intersections during a rush hour. Some of that is not going to, be like hard data. It's going to be more anecdotal, but what are the queues like? And like Pat mentioned, like how are the employees of the site traveling? Are they on track to meet the commitments in the mobility management plan? Are they not? So, I could imagine a scenario where you have to continue to justify the usage of the valet, something like that. I think
Can I
there
just ask,
potentially could be something there.
Justin, just as a lead, because I haven't studied, but I don't want to play too heavily on equity because it doesn't matter, and my mother would caution me against pointing at the other developer. But 5 Middlesex isn't under. My guess is they're not under review and sunset, right? So my only concern, Mr. Chair, is like we're at a 0.65, we're using valet, they go online, blow up the street grid, and then we pay for it. I mean, like the district doesn't have sort of parity and equity in terms of how we're doing things. So I do worry, like it could be great for us because they may not be leased and it may look way better than our study does because we're the only ones operating, but it could also be the other way around where we're paying a price for someone else.
You get that. I want to continue this discussion at some point because I think we have a lot of good ideas that are kind of in the ether right now. But I think we need to come back with some more concrete ideas and responses because I think both folks are both sides I think are coming up with some very good concerns that I think are reasonable and that I share on both the applicant and the administration side. And I'm hoping, just like you said, Anthony, we might be able to continue this discussion and come up with some sort of an agreement that can satisfy to the best of our ability both of us so that we can move this forward to a way that's manageable, right? Because right now we're getting significant pushback, and I don't love going directly contrary to the recommendation that's being provided to us. I'm not opposed to it, but I want to know exactly what it is that we're looking at before I elect to take a vote. Does anybody else have any issues? I see Jahan on this particular issue.
Mr. Chair, I actually wanted to just mention, since we have Justin available, if I may ask a quick question for Justin, which will help clarify my understanding.
Please, yeah.
Great. So Justin, I know you've been hearing a lot of the ideas tossed around, and again, I applaud the applicant team along with Attorney Gluccio for being flexible and working with us. As we're talking about all these considerations here, if you could just share your thoughts around Mass DOT and if there's going to be any aspects of it that we need to keep in mind. I just want to make sure that as we move forward and as the applicant team goes back to the drawing board, so to speak, to figure out some solutions, are we missing anything, not just from Somerville mobility perspective, but anything on the state level or any other considerations that we may not have discussed here?
I'm sorry, I'm not entirely clear on the question. Would you mind
Sure.
clarifying?
Sure. So as we're talking about these different proposals, I know that due to the site parcel being close to Mass DOT jurisdiction, do we need to consider anything, in terms of solutions that have been proposed both by my fellow board members as well as what Anthony Lucio has said in terms of his willingness to come up with solutions? Is there an aspect that we're missing here, or can we proceed on a solution on our agreement that could be undertaken with the folks on this call?
I guess I'll say I don't think we're missing anything. I think this project is in the middle of state permitting as well. I don't entirely think I can comment on that here, and the applicant may be able to talk a little bit more about that piece. But things like state projects, like the McGrath Boulevard project, there's an intersection project at the big intersection of the highway and McGrath,
Right.
have all been contemplated in the TAS, and in fact, that's why Mobility pushed pretty hard for this idea of a multi-use path, is because it would connect to improvements that MassDOT is planning to build underneath the highway to connect to East Somerville and Brick Bottom and Ten Hills. So I guess to answer, I think we are sort of contemplating all the things we need to contemplate in that regard.
Okay, I think that's really helpful. I appreciate that, just because I would hate for us to move things forward, come to a general consensus, hopefully in the near future, and then for things to unravel potentially. So thank you so much for responding.
Mr. Chair, could I just even more optimistic response on that? I would characterize MassDOT's early comments as extremely consistent with the improvements that they're looking to make. Justin, not that we're done with completely, but in looking at their comments, very aligned with all the things that they're trying to do along the connections. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
I would agree.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah. Let's see, Ryan, you have your hand up. Did you want to speak?
Yeah, I'm just I'm trying to kind of synthesize next steps and comments here, and I guess I just want to kind of revisit our perspective as the developer and owner on some of these topics to just make it kind of clear on, I guess, our perspective to the extent it's beneficial. I mean, we have operated in the neighborhood and worked with mobility before, so I think we kind of came into this with an expectation of where targets that we needed to be at, and maybe we went in with those targets day one, and maybe I think we're being pushed to a higher standard now, which I guess I accept. I just want to highlight, as we talk about ratios, the self-park ratio is a 0.51. That is a significantly lower parking ratio than what I'd say is market. Enough so that if that was it, we probably would not. If that was the only parking available, I think we'd struggle to get the project financed and leased. And that is honest feedback. And we can, if it's helpful, we can bring our brokers, and industry representatives on. We used valet on 74 Middlesex as a way to bridge that gap. We do have designs for the garage. We're physically building the same garage. We're just operating a valet within the garage that allows for the additional parking spaces to accommodate kind of that peak demand and meet kind of a leasability threshold that really is a threshold. And I do understand we're at a bit of an impasse here, but it truly is, working with Anthony, kind of going into this process. We've been at it for several years. We've kind of known where our threshold is, and it really, is going to be tough to go further. So we've been working on strategies to help everybody. I think practically we're all saying the same thing. Like, we don't want to operate valet. We want to see reduced parking usage from enhanced transit options, shuttle services, whatever it is, and how we can all work there without having a kind of a binding commitment. And that's just just providing our perspective. I think that's kind of internal to our building. The other part is kind of the external impacts on the surrounding area. Again, I think we're at a bit of an impasse between the technical and the practical. We have a transportation impact study that shows that there'll be 7,600 cars entering the building every day and exiting. However, there's only 935 spaces in the parking garage, and there just seems to be a significant disconnect. So I understand the impact of queuing, but I'm not a traffic expert, but there seems to be a material disconnect between what the transportation data following industry standards is telling us and what we know is reality. And I'm not sure any technical, kind of conversation is going to be able to bridge that gap. There's maximum 935 spaces. People park for the entire day. There has to probably be a level of practicality we can layer on top of that to accommodate it. And I'd like to find the best way. We haven't been able to find it after several months of work to get there. So that's the second piece. I think we're open to a lot of suggestions we're offering here, but and a lot of these aren't kind of just Greystar as a developer. It's thinking about the future tenants that will live here and what they'll be willing to accept, right, or that will work here. So I just wanted to kind of highlight the broad perspective where we're coming from for planning board's benefit.
I appreciate that, Ryan. I just asked because I did not recall. I asked Steve to check on 5 Middlesex, and what talking about neighborhood and broader pictures and all that. And it completely skipped my mind because we permitted them in June of 2021, where I was in the middle of COVID brain, and have no memory of what it is that we did there. We permitted 1,300 spaces, a 6-minute walk from your property, for a 9-story parking garage. So that's going to, I think, give me a little bit of perspective of to what we might be looking at as a regional need and what is already being met by something that's already been permitted. I looked at that number and I just thought, Steve was lying to me. But Jesus Christ. So I think I have some thinking to do on this application as it relates to that particular issue. Does anybody else have anything else that they would like to talk about as it relates to the mobility aspect of it? Yeah, Amelia.
Thank you so much. And thank you, Ryan, for talking through that. I mean, like, I certainly understand the fundamental viability of the ratios topic. Where I'm a little bit stuck on this as one member is I would love to see mobility get comfortable with updated analysis that Patrick might be able to provide that's more reflective of what we think the conditions will actually be, if that's not something that's happened yet, because we are not traffic experts and we are relying on our traffic experts to help us navigate what the impacts will be. But not every piece of land is created equal in terms of its access and therefore how much parking it can support without impacting the road network. And so when we're looking at this comprehensively as part of our, city planning scope, it is fine to say, if you picked up this building and you put it on the other side of Assembly, then it would be near a longer road and there wouldn't be a queuing issue that would have mobility concerned. And I don't know that anyone would be having the same concerns about the fundamental number of parking or the ratio or trying to hold you to a higher standard were that not the case. It is the misfortune of this site, and perhaps not suggesting that the layout is bad, but perhaps there could have been a different hypothetical that would have accommodated, but this is just where we are, and that the roads are short and therefore there is this queuing issue. So if there's a different lens that you'd like us to look at that from, I welcome it, but that's where I'm a little bit stuck in that. I think while we'd like to look at these all equitably, there's a wide variety of street grid dynamics in different locations, even within this neighborhood. And we're sort of getting stuck on this unique parcel. And Justin, if you think I've mischaracterized that, please correct me.
No, I think you're effectively highlighting exactly the point I'm trying to make. And we're seeing like the fundamental disconnect between the city's desire to reduce traffic and parking and the realities of building a building like this. And it's, I mean, the idea of trying to come to a proposal that Michael mentioned is intriguing to me, only because it allows us to see what actually would occur. And then, it seems like it's a matter of how to make tenants comfortable with that.
And Mr. Chair, on and on, Brian's gonna block my number after tonight because I'm gonna try to move this in any way possible, but we're talking about 200 spaces so if you look, to your point, Amelia, the whole scale of Assembly, optimistically, we've set a new low bar even at the number we're at now, we've set a new low bar, which is probably going to get me in trouble with, you know, I'm going to be known as that person. But it feels like to me, Michael, that you're sort of objectively saying these two analysts may never agree on worst case scenario. It may not be that bad. If we have a chance to adjudicate it and review it, that gives us a real opportunity. I would hope that that analysis takes into consideration other sites so that we're not the ones fixing someone else's problem. And then my issue with that would be to minimize the potential reduction so that we can have an actual lease. Because the tenant's going to look at worst case scenario. They're not going to pay us or lease something based on the best case scenario. So the goal, and Greystar may tell me to stand down and would just leave this as is, but if there's an opportunity after some period of time with mitigation in place that we would, you know, we've all agreed to all of it, to say, you're going to come in, report back, traffic's going to present, you guys will present. And if certain criteria is met on either side, some percentage of the valet gets reduced or not reduced. I feel like, no disrespect to the number, but the numbers we're talking about are not going to make or break assembly. But it sounds like you're trying to set precedents for how to better manage parking supply, and we want to be a partner in that. So I don't think we're going to get to a sunset of all 200 spaces and have this still be a feasible project. So maybe there's a way to sort of, from a precedent standpoint and incrementally, to look at it. And hopefully we come back and say, good news, like, not awesome to pull out of there at 5, but it's not a nightmare. And you guys have a great, you know, 2 or 3 great lab buildings that are delivering, you know, revenues and R&D for the city. So I can't promise that. We'll have to go back and think about it.
With that item of discussion, I think, fully fleshed out, I'm going to channel my my inner John McLaughlin. Issue 2, the size. We're talking about how a building that's 290 feet is going to fit 700 and some odd parking spaces. Because right now the site is allowed to be permitted at 125 feet. And one of the concerns that we regularly get from you know, neighbors is shadows and impacts on communities and things like that. And sometimes they're a little overblown, and sometimes they're fairly meritorious. So I took a look at your shadow studies that were produced, and again a couple of weeks ago, and even at 125 feet, right, it does impact a couple of homes on Bailey and 10 Hills Road, things like that. But when you get up to the 290, it really can be a significant impact on homes in the 10 Hills neighborhood. It really, you know, during some of those equinoxes, it can cover an entire block of homes for a good portion of the morning. And that is significant. You know, I think one of the renderings showed it going all the way out to, you know, basically to the Grimmins Park area. And that's a huge amount of shadow coverage for a neighborhood for a good portion of the morning, for a decent portion of the year. And so my question then becomes, okay, you can do 125 now, you're asking for 290 and X number of parking spaces as a ratio to the 290. So we start at presuming you get the 290. So I asked around for Steve to give me an idea of what does a 290-foot building look like? Because that means kind of nothing to me, right? That's amorphous. it's bigger than the humongous tower we just permitted and was built in Union Square along the train tracks, which I think is 270. So immediately you are going to be probably the tallest, if not one of the tallest buildings in the city. When you don't have right now the right to be. You're asking for permission to be the biggest building in the city. And that to me is a point of discussion. Because when I hear you coming to the board asking for 290 feet, we're going to be a lab building, which this board has raised both to you and to other applicants, that it's difficult to get tenanting in lab buildings right now. My concern is we build a 290-foot building with nobody in there for 5 to 10 years. And that's an issue to me. So why is it that we're at 290? Do you have somebody, and you don't have to tell me who, but do you have somebody ready to come in and say, I need 290 feet. I'm going to come in. I'm going to leave the Seaport. I'm going to leave Kendall. I'm going to leave whomever. I'm going to leave Charlotte and move to your building in Somerville because this is what you are building? Or is this, build it and pray to God that they'll come within 5 years?
Well, first, can I just respond? I don't think you're going to see buildings built to spec anymore. I mean, I don't think the market is ever going to reset to where we thought was the norm, where people were building the spec. I think when lab resets, it's going to be a different lab market. I don't even think I happen to represent folks in Core Kendall. I don't think you're going to see building to spec at even places like Volpe. So you won't have an empty building. I'll let Ryan talk to sort of how big is necessary to be competitive. And I know, Mr. Chair, you folks are sort of the last group, but I do want you to appreciate that. I don't know if it was 2.5 years ago, we went to the Mystics and they were bigger the better, taller the bigger the better. So we went back to the city because we wanted to actually do bigger floor plates and not have the hotel. And we were going to go for variances, which probably would have changed the height. We would have had bigger lab floor plates. And Sarah said, no, we want you to come back compliant. So we ended up with the 3-building project. But it's been a little bit of a strange journey because when we started, it was, we don't care about civic space and assembly and put as much R&D square footage on the ground as you can, because this was the vision for assembly. And now, as things always do, they start to level off. I appreciate. I thought your memory or recollection of the study was accurate, although I looked at it like spring at 9 o'clock, 9 to 10, at 10:30 starts moving around. So I'll be honest, I didn't think it was, from the standpoint of presentation, I didn't think from the base height to the other height, it was a significant impact. I thought it was that time of year, that period for a couple hours, but I just want you to know, like, if we had started the process and the community was really weighing in on height and density, we probably would have, remember, we also negotiated the adjacent partial and put it under an umbrella. And so that was all based on, that deal was all based on what we thought the city and the community wanted. But Ryan, will you talk about what the sort of how you view the square footage and density with relation to the market?
Yeah, I mean, I think Anthony did a good summary of there was what drove us to this height. We are developing 74 Middlesex or near completion on 74 Middlesex, which is I believe 245 feet of zoning height. So not the exact same height, but comparable. And I know 120 Middlesex has approvals for around the 290-foot range or so. I'm not sure off the top of my head. 74 Middlesex was built on spec. We are in a leasing process. There is potential tenant interest. We have had preliminary interest. There are some there are larger operators, big pharma, biotech companies that are looking for headquarters locations. We have invested significantly in Assembly because we do believe it has the infrastructure to truly be a headquarters location, like a Seaport or like a Kendall Square. I think kind of, and there are mass gen, non-biotech, non-life science users are headquartered in Assembly, right? So we know the infrastructure is there, the highway's there, and so the conversation, has been. I don't think there's a magic number to what that size looks like. There has been interest from a potential tenant that elected to go elsewhere, that was looking for about 700,000 square feet, and that would take one of the spaces of those buildings. There's no magic to that number necessarily. It was derived through a various number of iterations early in the process, and I think that the feedback from the Mystic Task Force when we had our first community meeting probably 2.5 years ago was go as tall as possible. And I'm not saying that's they're the only constituent that matters here, but as the neighborhood plan developed over 10 years, this was the area, and I think the area that has the infrastructure to support. And we won't loop traffic into that. We'll keep that outside of this conversation. But otherwise, the infrastructure to support the highest density development in Somerville. Versus some of the other locations, given infrastructure that's in Assembly, the proximity to the highway, the rapid transit and bus connections that are there, the physical kind of walking connections and bicycle connections, and just general proximity to the city.
Yeah,
So
I get
hopefully
that.
that helps.
It does to some degree, right? So I'm always of the mindset of just because you can, does that mean that you should? I also view these as, again, even if you should you do it on this particular site? Because how does this particular site impact the surrounding neighborhood in a meaningful and direct way? And I think we can maybe disagree on the intensity of the severity of the shadow impact on the Ten Hills neighborhood. I saw at the 290 height that I thought that was quite significant, more significant than I was anticipating. And I get that the building next door might be 245. That's significantly shorter. That's 25% shorter. And so, is there a mechanism by which you feel like this is still a feasible project by reducing it a little bit to mitigate the impact that the surrounding neighborhood will feel? I think I mentioned in at least our last meeting, if not the first time that we met, is I agree that this is probably a good location for something above 125, but I'm not convinced that it needs to be 290, right? So if you take it down to, I'm just using a number 250, right? Make it the same size as the building next door. That's also going to mitigate some of the traffic and parking issues that we talked about. Maybe not to the degree that's sufficient to the city. We're talking ratios versus raw numbers, but that will impact raw numbers. I understand that it's a long process, but I keep hearing references to tenants with potential interest, and Monday is January 20th, and all I can recall is somebody having concepts of a plan. And that to me isn't the most confident sounding thing for me to say, let's build a 290-foot building without any semblance of a guarantee that it's going to be utilized in in the next 10 years. So I have reservations about going up as high as you're proposing. I think a reduction could solve a couple of issues, or at least mitigate a couple of issues. One of them is the shadow impact on the surrounding neighborhood. The other could be the amount of raw vehicles that might need to use the site and use the surrounding road network. And the third is you got the building was at 125. You know, asking for 290 is nice, but that's, you know, that's asking for something more than what you bought the property for. You know, so you had to have expected taking it at 125 was going to be somewhat financially feasible. And because there's no guarantee that you're going to get the 290, right? You know, the entire board could vote no, and you can still do something at 125. It just won't be necessarily what you're hoping for. I'm not saying that's going to be the case, but I don't buy a house with the hope that maybe I might be able to, you know, put in a pool. You know, I buy the house knowing that I'm going to want the house. So I'm wondering if we can have a discussion among the board and you all on whether that concern that I have is something that is unique to me or something that my fellow board members have thought on and have questions or comments too. No.
Mr. Chair, I would say, this is just editorial. It's a confusing district because of the FAR and the height waiver. When we started, there was no sense that height was going to be an issue. So I'm not going to talk, I don't know how Ryan underwrote the deal, but I can tell you, you know, if, you know, under deposition, we don't want civic space. You can buy out of it. There shouldn't be people playing in parks next to the highway, and density and height is no issue. So you're right. That's not how you underwrite a deal because that's what the political wins are. But I can't, it's challenging to reconcile the difference because if you're at a 10 FAR with 35,000 square foot floor plates, you're probably talking about labs that don't, I mean, you might have like a Greentown lab, a few like innovation type, but you're not going to land real tenants. So I don't think the base height lines up with wanting real lab with that FAR. So it's weird, but it's a permitting step and you guys are forced to take a vote on it. So I get it. I would say this, and this is just to defend, because you're right, it's all hypothetical. But when we permitted North Point, Somerville said, we want lab. You've got to get us lab. And we said, well, we know if we have really big floor plates, we can potentially pull tenants from Kendall. And we have massive floor plates along the railroad, like ridiculous. I didn't say ridiculous during the permitting, but those unusually large floor plates were able to attract really strong tenants who wanted headquarters. We couldn't promise it, but we knew that if there were bigger floor plates and we had enough parking, we would have a better chance at landing tenants. So like you're never going to be able to say it's going to do the trick, but when you're not on the corner of 3rd and Binney Street and you're not right in Kendall proper, the more you can add to the equation to be competitive, the better. But you're right. There's no, is there an exact magic line? Probably not. But again, the floor plates are also restricted, which is not helpful because if you can get to 45 or 50, you're really hitting pay dirt. And then the upper floors aren't as valuable anyway. But you guys have restricted the floor plates there. So those two things work against each other a little bit. So we've tried to navigate that.
I respect that, and it looks like that I might feel like a person who's a little concerned here, and I'll certainly take that for what it's worth as I think about how I'm going to approach a vote on this application. So for certain, I see Amelia's hand.
Mr. Chair, I just wanted to say that I share your concern. I think that members of the team jumped in before I was able to voice my comment. And I saw Jahan's hand as well. I'm happy to expand on that, but Jahan, you was up.
Yeah, while you have the floor, Amelia, please feel free to expand.
No, I just
and then I'll recognize Jahan because I didn't see your hand. Then I'm sorry.
I do think that this feels like a lot of building for this site and for this location in light of the proximity to the neighborhood. And you know, I always go back to sort of the basis of the planning documents that we are, you know, obligated to be responsive to in reviewing this kind of thing. And I do see that heights sort of up to this range were included in the assembly plan. I think that's a reasonable basis for you to have come in at in thinking through what could be accommodated here. But I also hear feedback from the community that there are real concerns. I don't know that Ten Hills was sufficiently engaged in the community process for the development of the draft neighborhood plan. I would welcome input from staff at this or a subsequent meeting about that, just to understand where we are there. But the question that I had for you is whether, in looking at the organization of the buildings on site, and I am aware that you've already given this a lot of thought, whether there's any opportunity to try to reduce I believe it's building 1, the northernmost building, even possibly at the expense of adding that height to building 2. Like, I would be very interested in seeing a shadow study that made an effort to concentrate the height on the south side of the site a bit in the hopes of mitigating some of the worst impacts to the neighborhood. And I know that with the sort of the shift of FAR south, that's a little bit of an architectural trick that may not work that way. But I would be very curious to see if you might be able to show us a little bit of like a sensitivity analysis of what would need to come down or be reallocated to try to address that concern, because it does feel like a lot at the one location within assembly that is most impactful to a residential neighborhood. You know, I think a lot of the height in assembly works because it's only shading other lab buildings. And that's just simply not the environment that we're in here at the edge of the site. So that's a question that I had for the applicant team.
Mr. Chair, Michael, our architect is on. I don't know how much he wants to be on the hot seat. Ryan, it may be best for you to just at a high level respond, because I think ultimately the architect's going to follow your lead.
Yeah, I think there's a number of factors there. I think it's something we can kind of study. There are, you know, some efficiencies we're trying to hit, and mechanical penthouse sizing to tie to building, you know, heights, or you know, number of floors, and certain levels of efficiencies. But we can take another look at that. I think to the chairman's first comments about concerns about empty buildings, I do think I just want to highlight, as Anthony first suggested, the speculative market's really gone. We don't anticipate commencing construction until we have, you know, pre-leasing or tenants in place, and you know, particularly 74 Middlesex fully leased. It is important to be in a position to have a kind of shovel-ready site to be able to attract those larger tenants. So, you know, something that, because construction does take 3 years, and that's usually the time frame those larger tenants will look for space in, and it's harder to attract them if you have an uncertain path to a building. So a little bit of this has been kind of, you know, having the infrastructure, the building scale to be able to be attractive to those tenants that I will say our primary competitor, you know, for location for a headquarters tenant would be, and we do cater to smaller tenants too. I don't want to discount that, but obviously a headquarters tenant is attractive to everyone. But we're competing against namely the Seaport and the Volpe Center development, which do have projects of similar kind of scale. Not to say there's magic in the 700 number, and we can study that. And to the chairman's point, there, you know, maybe there's a happy medium for everybody that we can get to. So I think we can look at that and evaluate, understanding some of the context here.
I appreciate that, Ryan, because one of the ways that I've always approached my role on this board is to get to a place where we can have the best project that we can. Because I hate voting no, unless I have to. When I vote no on a project, it's because somebody is intransigent or the project is so bad that I can't really see a way out of it. And I know it takes longer than some people want. But I am a lawyer and I negotiate. We try to figure out what's going to work for everybody. So I appreciate your willingness to take a second look at what might be workable for you, but also kind of addresses the concerns that were raised by certainly by the neighborhood, but also by me and Amelia thus far. So thank you for that. Amelia, did you have anything else that you wanted to add before I recognize Jahan if he still wants to go?
No, thank you.
Okay. John, you still want to go?
Yes, Mr. Chair. So, I just wanted to mention, I echo the initial concerns that you had shared regarding the height, particularly with the impact to the Ten Hills neighborhood, and I do appreciate Madam Vice Chair's proposal or thoughts around maybe the building heights on the project site could be adjusted. One item, and actually, Mr. Chair, this is a question for you. When you had earlier mentioned, that if we were to vote for this, the height that's being proposed by the applicant, this would be one of the, if not the tallest building in Somerville. I wanted to get your thoughts on to what extent we as a board should be looking at this consideration. I mean, what role would it play? We certainly know the Boynton Yards project, the height there. I certainly respect and appreciate the Ten Hills neighborhood's concerns, and I share them. But just the fact that it will be the tallest building or one of the tallest buildings in Somerville, I'd like to get your thoughts just for my own understanding here.
Sure. I mean, I don't look at it necessarily in a vacuum being this is a tall building, this is bad. When I look at data like that, and comparisons like that, the way I view it is how does the raw number relate to the surrounding neighborhood, right? So you can have the tallest building in the world in the middle of Kansas and it doesn't matter, right? But with a building of this proposed size in a dense neighborhood, adjacent to a residential neighborhood of 2 and 3 family homes, that analysis gets a little bit different. So the size as a standalone factor is interesting. It's nice for comparison, but I don't necessarily look at it strictly as the tallest building. Oh my God, I've got to run away. I look at it as, okay, this is going to be one of the tallest buildings in the city. How does it relate? Is this a good place for a building of that size and with that distinction? So I don't know if that answers your question or if I'm dancing around you.
No, it does, Mr. Chair, because I was going along the lines of thinking, should this be considered a precedent-setting action? Just the, that would be a different conversation, but it doesn't seem like that's where you're headed.
No, and I'll leave that comment to offline at some point.
Sure, absolutely.
But no, I'm not concerned with the height per se. I am concerned with the massing and the height as it relates to this particular project at this stage in the process.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I share those concerns as you have outlined. Thank you.
Okay. Anybody? Yeah, Luke.
Just chime in on this thread. Is an opportunity for me to be a minority voice again, maybe. I feel pretty comfortable with the height. I appreciate some of the concerns and I, especially the idea that we shouldn't look at all of Assembly as identical set of parcels, and this corner is different than if it were, up on the Mystic or something where we've already seen more this scale development, although not the 290. But one thing that I just think is helpful to not lose sight of is that this can feel like a negotiation, planning board with the applicant team, and our interests are diametrically opposed. And so we should be pushing for less height and they should be pushing for up to the stars and the moon. But a lot of this can be really positive sum, and I just don't want us to forget that. So, a different Somerville hat I wear is as a parent of a kid at the Winter Hill School, which is going to need to get rebuilt. And I know there's another school that needs to get rebuilt. And the more economic activity, the more leasable space we have pushed into assembly, the more the city is going to be able to fund all of the infrastructure needs we have in other ways. So, shadows of abutters in 10 Hills is one legitimate consideration for us to have in mind. But, to the extent the planning board's, looking out for the city of Somerville as a whole, I think that could be an argument for going higher than 290. Just wanted to remind us that it's not just the residents of 10 Hills that have a stake in this too.
Yeah, look, I'm gonna respectfully disagree with some of the sentiments that you share, but that's okay. That's why we have a bunch of people on the board, and I'm always happy to have discussions with you on where we can find some common ground, as we have in the past. Anybody else want to? Michael, are those fingers that I see? Okay.
They are, Mr. Chair. I'm reluctant to take more auction.
I saw this going on. I don't know if that's a hand or what.
Yeah, sorry. Just a little reluctant to take more oxygen out of the room after the last back and forth. I'm just going to give some high-level thoughts since you were trying to take temperature on the rest of the board. I also am not particularly overly concerned based on the fact that there already is a 250-foot building, in construction, almost built. So the difference between 250 and 290, I don't know what that means. I think I do like your suggestion that 250 might be a better benchmark. I just also want to chime in and say that, I want to reiterate my point from, I think it was the last meeting, that by reducing height, you're also going to, take a little bit of pressure off of your ratio issue. So slightly less height might be better. But at the end of the day, I definitely don't feel like this needs to be capped at what is allowed by right. I think we should be exploring higher heights than that. So that's all I got to say.
Yeah, sure, Michael. I think my sentiment from what I've heard from the board, and one that I share too, is you're right. I don't think we're saying 125. I think we are all generally in agreement that a bigger project is appropriate here. I think the question is what does that mean? And let's see where we can go with that. So I think Ryan or Attorney Galuccio, I don't know if you have anything else that you want to raise with the board as it relates to this issue in particular, or if we've kind of exhausted this line of discussion.
No, it's helpful. We'll take it back, and I thought it was a holistic conversation. We should look. There are a bunch of different things that get said. One is moving density, so there's no real economic loss, and I think also, like a municipal leader, it's like one of these big lab buildings can make a huge economic difference to the tax base, and I don't want to lose to a competitor in another city because we're not poised. And I don't know if 30 or 40 feet, the good news about the shadows is they move. So like when you see that equinox, it's at a point and then it's going to move during the morning. So like that point's probably not going to change that much by 30 or 40 feet. But I do appreciate your position, Mr. Chair. So let's look at, I have a list of things that, there's some interest in moving the dial on, and I'm going to take them all back and we'll do the best we can.
Thank you. Yeah, because I do share enthusiasm for this project, as I think the board does generally, and like anything, we want to make the project as good as we can, with all of the kind of competing interests that surround it, right? That's what makes it difficult. So I appreciate you and the team's willingness to have this discussion with us, with city staff, with the neighborhood. And so you guys have been kind of nothing but great to work with,
Thank you.
at least in my estimation. You
And we'll put a premium on getting it done. I will say, because it's been, we were in such a glorious time, if you wanted R&D development, right? And it just stopped abruptly and everyone got very, very unhappy and miserable. I do have something moving in Kendall, and then it became how quick can you finalize your permits and get shovel in the ground? So it went from, complete zero energy to like as fast. So getting it entitled puts us in a position where we can tell tenants like we're ready to go. So that it didn't feel like that mattered 6 months ago, but we're inching towards maybe that mattering again. So getting it done, getting this stage of permitting done so we can go into site plan is certainly important.
I get that. I am certainly not trying to artificially delay
I know that.
anything. I know you do. I know you do. So so I kind of raised two issues that were on my mind. I don't know if anybody else has thoughts that are not those two issues, if we want to move into issue 3 with different areas of discussion. I see Amelia.
I just want to say one final thing on that height issue, if I may. From at least my perspective, I think even mitigating it by like a floor would be. I think when the city was putting together the assembly height limits, they were referring to things in stories. And my instinct is that when the city was conceptualizing what different stories meant, they may not have been thinking about the additional height of a loud penthouse that meets the requirements before by the city, which we all know is a substantial chunk of the height at the top here. So I feel like even a small decrease that offset that perhaps unanticipated penthouse height would be for one board member at least, very well received. Thank you.
Anybody else have anything that they would like to raise before we ask these good folks to rejoin us in February? I want to thank you all again for what I think and hope was a good and fruitful discussion. I look forward to seeing you in a few weeks. Do
we want to set a date?
Thank you.
Do
you want February 6th, or do you want later than that? Let me tell you what we've got. We've got February 6th and February 20th. Those are the two February dates. If you want to go beyond that, March 6th to March 20th.
We're not in design phase, so I think those big issues conceptually can be, thought about and responded to by the 6th. I feel like some of the conditions are going to have refinement necessary anyway at the staff level. Like if you do vote on something, it's not going to be every T is not going to be crossed. So Ryan, can we stick with the 6th? I don't know if Ryan, he's got.
Yeah, we can, I think we can plan on that. And
Okay.
I guess we'll recollect if we need more time to process, but it seems feasible.
Yeah.
Good.
Obviously, if you need more time, we're more than happy to work with you.
Good. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. We need to formally vote to continue to the 6th. So the chair moves to continue this agenda item to February 6th, seconded by Amelia. Steve, please call the roll.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Hi.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Thank you all very much, and see you in a few weeks.
Thanks.
Okay. Planning board has a few other items on its agenda that are matters of other business. Let's take up the proposed amendments to the rules of policy and procedure. So can we get Steve, who I think is the appropriate person to talk about the proposed amendments?
Sure. Let me just pull these up. There are two of them. The first is under board organization, which is two. B, officers, two duties, and then under duties of the chair, we're proposing adding that the chair can sign subdivision plan approval plans on behalf of the board pursuant to Somerville zoning ordinance 15.3.1. You guys will recall at the end of last year we had it was 50 Webster Street subdivision plat plan. So this would just allow there to be one signature by the chair, or if the chair designates the vice chair or clerk on that plat plan, instead of having all the members who voted affirmatively have to sign. So that is the purpose of that one. Happy to answer any questions about it. And then the second is just to change under for meetings and hearings, under meeting management, under public participation, under public hearings. We have that unless otherwise stated by the chair, written testimony will be accepted until, right now it's noon on Friday before the public hearing. We're asking that we change that to 7:30 p.m. on Thursday. That's close of business for the Somerville City. That just allows, it makes it a little bit easier for staff to get those public comments to you on the Friday, just because that way we're not waiting until technically Friday noon for those to come in, and that way first thing Friday morning we can get those out to you without waiting to that noon deadline. Yeah, so those are the two that staff are recommending. Yeah, Luke, go ahead.
All sounds reasonable. I had just sort of a related thought to number two around public written testimony, which is, I think sometimes to the public, it can feel like the only way they can communicate to us is by meeting this official deadline. And no one ever says that, but obviously someone could email any of us or see us at the grocery store and share their thoughts about something. And I just was thinking about it, it made me think, I know some boards, I don't know if this is true in Somerville, but certain other places I've seen it, when I was in Cambridge, we did it, put email addresses for members on the website, or a direct submission form that would, send centrally to board members. Has that ever been considered, or is there, a good reason to not do that in our context? Because it could give people additional opportunity to share input, even if they miss the official deadline, they can still reach out through an email.
Amelia, do you want to?
If we were going to discuss that further, I would like to discuss it in conjunction with us having City of Somerville email addresses, because I have no interest in making my Gmail more involved in open meeting law compliance than it is.
Yep.
Which I'm not opposed to, but.
Yep. So one, I agree with you. Two, my concerns on that are a couple of things. One is the reason we ask people to submit to planning ad is because it's a central place where everybody knows, so you're not getting some things and forget to forward it, or accidentally goes into your spam, or vice versa. Or for example, if somebody emails three of us, is that a violation of the open meeting law, because now three of us are on an email chain that discusses official business, whether we're deliberating or not, that raises a concern. So that I'd like to get some guidance on. The second thing is just the way that public hearings are formally held is there is an open and close of testimony, and there needs to be a date and a time certain by which that is closed. And I mean, the reality is people submit stuff after the deadline all the time, and we usually look at it. But the question is, if we make a decision that then for example, gets appealed, right? The question before a reviewing court is going to be what is in the actual record that was before the board. And so that needs to be a finite item that can be readily produced. And so that's the reason that there needs to be an open and a close, and anything that comes in afterwards, that's nice. We generally read it because it's the responsible thing to do. But there needs to be there needs to be a formal administrative record that's created in a thoughtful
Just
way.
to be clear, totally, I'm not questioning having the formal deadline at all. It's just, this is only about anything in addition to, is there a way to make it one half step easier for people to know it's easy to reach out? You know, whatever, all good. We don't need to do anything, but it's just, maybe I'll just end by saying, I think it's helpful to just keep it like, if we want a spirit of public input, we always say that's so important. Just, I won't even end this with a concrete idea, I guess, but it just feels, sometimes it feels like the way we talk about it, it's like Thursday night before the meeting coming up several days in advance is the last time. It just, I worry it sometimes sort of unintentionally implies that.
Yeah, I mean, the reason we usually did it a few days in advance is because, particularly with some, we haven't had one in a while, a very contentious project, right? We haven't had one in a while, but when we get it, we get public comments, written testimony in the hundreds, right? Reams of paper worthy emails printed out, and it takes staff a considerable amount of time to be able to synthesize that and produce that to us in a PDF, but whatever it's going to be, and then it takes us time to do engage in our responsibility to review the stuff. So that's why it's always been a couple of days before. If the meeting's generally Thursday night, I don't know how much work you guys are doing on the weekends. I'm doing some, but I'd prefer not to. I don't have to. And then we all have full-time jobs. So we're really talking about a couple of nights after work that we might be able to review substantial amounts of testimony. That's why we always did it on the Friday before, because it gives us at least a weekend and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday after work. Hey, buddy. And this, I think, just moving it back to 10 hours or so, just to facilitate the staff that actually the official hours of the city. That's the only reason that I don't mind doing it.
The reminder that we haven't recently had, and hardly in my time even had one where there have been 100 comments in a couple days. I mean, it relates to Amelia's point that if that happens, our inboxes get flooded, and that would be a lot. So yeah, I appreciate that.
We just went through an election cycle, and I'm still trying to unsubscribe. Like, oh my God. All right. Does anybody else have any? Yeah, Mike.
I would just share that first, Luke. I also have this nagging feeling in the back of my head that it's sometimes difficult for folks to engage the board. And so I would love to spend some time brainstorming with you on ways to amp up that engagement. So I just want to put that out there. I don't know if there's anything concrete to put into this vote or discussion, but I have that feeling. So would love to explore that more. With regards to the timeline, Mr. Chair, I actually do this on the weekend. This is like I spend a couple of hours in the morning, Saturday and Sunday, going through all of this, reading all the testimony, stuff like that. So I do appreciate the Friday deadline as opposed to, say, a Monday deadline. But I also, am kind of putting on my member of the public sometimes hat and think a little bit about when I normally am engaging in this process outside of the planning board, in my time in previous cities and things like that. I'm usually not doing it in the middle of the day or the work day on Thursday. It's going to be in the evenings and in the mornings. And so my only ask here would be if staff would be open to like a 9 a.m. deadline on Friday, or if there actually is a material shift between Thursday at 7:30 and Friday at 9. Because like I am the type of person who's submitting stuff at 6:30 in the morning or sometimes at 9 at night. And so I could understand why a member of the public might want that extra, couple of hours.
I can respond. No, I don't think 9 a.m. on Friday on our end, I think would be fine. It was really just that, like that noon deadline made it so that we were sort of like waiting until noon, and then our workday ends at 12:30 on Friday. So, particularly on those, the couple of occasions where we were getting a lot of comments coming in, we were kind of waiting around till noon to see if any came in and then trying to like package them up and get it out to the board. So on our end, I think 9 a.m. would be fine. It's, you know, the same idea. We'd be able to come into work that Friday morning, see the comments that are there. And if you think that would substantially make a difference in terms of, you know, the kinds of people that, you know, on a Thursday evening or Friday morning might be submitting those comments, I think we'd be fine with that as staff.
What is the practice of the land use committee when we're doing things? Like they always hold themselves to our timeline when we're doing joint things, but is there a best practice in other city branches?
So that was another, they also had been following our lead, setting their deadline for the Friday, the written testimony deadline for the Friday prior to the meeting where planning board was going to take it up. And we had recently asked Michael and you guys had instead set that deadline to be Thursday evening, because particularly with land use committee, in that case, those comments get sent because it's to the land use committee. Those comments get sent to the clerk. So there's an additional step in the communication where we wait for the clerk to send those comments to us. So that was particularly, you know, tough with the deadline being noon on a Friday. So I mean, I think they would probably be open to a Friday 9 a.m. deadline. But that is technically separate from what we're considering here because that is that's a separate body, that sets a deadline relative to the written testimony period of those land use committee hearings, whereas obviously the RPP for you guys is dictating written testimony for your public hearings. Sorry, did that answer your question?
I think it did. I think the answer was they don't do anything that works better.
Yeah, yes.
Thank you.
I, for one, I'm happy to change the proposed deadline to Friday at 9 a.m. Give people the extra period of time, particularly if it doesn't impact the way you do things, Steve, with you and staff.
Great.
Anybody else? Okay, let's do this. Let's take them one by one. For the first recommended amendment, for the chair to be able to sign on his or her own and or delegate. So not everybody has to hustle in to sign a thing on New Year's Eve. I move to adopt that as part of the rules and regs of the planning board. Seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you call the roll?
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Hi.
and Michael Capuano.
All right. And the next one is making the written testimony at 9 a.m. on the Friday prior to the meeting. Chair moves to adopt that as amended. Seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you call the roll?
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Hi.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Okay. And the last item on our agenda, elections. So we're at that. Looking at my Gucci, it's about that time. And I see a smile on Luke's face. So I will say this, I love being on this board. I love being the chair of this board. I hope I've done a good job. I think Amelia has done a phenomenal job. I think Jahan has done a great job as clerk. I'm happy to have a discussion, open-ended as to people's thoughts on this coming year, if you think it's necessary. Yes, Amelia, I saw you first. Then I saw Luke.
I was going to make a motion, so I'm happy for Luke to speak first.
Go for it, Luke.
Just want to say, I think we've got a good system and a good team in place. So happy to move forward and run it back again.
Let's see where we're at. I see Amelia first.
So I would like to nominate the chair to continue as the chair for this next term of the planning board.
Okay. Who would like to second that? Seconded by Jahan. Thank you very much. I appreciate the confidence, and I'll hope to not screw it up too badly. So, Steve, if you could please call the roll.
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Abstain.
Sure.
I would love to nominate Amelia as our very capable vice chair because she always brings such wonderful thoughts, views, professionalism, insight, and does a heck of a job when I'm sick or on vacation. And I think you're an asset to the board and to the city. So, and I'm glad I get to count you as a friend. So I nominate you to be the vice chair for 2025. Would someone like to second the nomination? Jahan has seconded it. John, formally. Steve, can you please call the roll?
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely.
Aye.
We'll skip Amelia and Michael Capuano.
Aye. You can call Amelia.
Amelia.
I will abstain. And Mike, I'm sorry, I didn't have all my flattery lined up, but those are very kind words. Thank you.
Are you kidding me? I'm a lawyer. That's my job. Jahan, you still like reading?
Yes, indeed, Mr. Chair.
You've been an incredibly competent clerk. I nominate you to remain our most literate member. So for 2025, I nominate Jahan to remain the clerk of the planning board. Does anybody want to call a second? Seconded by Amelia. Steve, can you please call the roll?
Luke Schuster,
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
I will abstain.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. Thank you all very much. I truly value having all of you on the board and also in the positions that you hold. I'm looking forward to another good year with you, and let's see where we go on the applications that have been before us. And I'm always excited to see what the heck's coming next. Don't go after I close out the meeting. No further business before the planning board. Yes, Amelia.
Mr. Chair, can we please add Luke and Michael's item about like broader conversation about public engagement to our other items agenda for the next meeting if time permits?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
Yes, John.
Mr. Chair, just a quick point of clarification regarding the proposed planning board meeting dates for the year. What is the mechanism of response? Should we be responding to Steve directly, copying you in, or if there's a different mechanism? Should we not be available for certain dates?
Oh, let Steve and me know.
Sure.
You know, if you know in advance, you know, if you
Sure,
have a
absolutely.
pre-planned vacation or something like that. You know, if you're intending to be sick, yeah, which is sometimes the case. Yeah, test in school. So yeah, if you take a look at the meeting dates and you realize, you know, you're not going to be able to make it, the earlier you can let people know, the better. Obviously, I think I'm good for all the meetings this year, but I'll double check.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Appreciate it.
Okay. Anybody else? No. Okay. Chair moves to adjourn, seconded by Amelia. Steve, can I have a roll call? Steve?
Sorry, I didn't realize I was muted. Luke
No, it's
Schuster,
okay.
Aye.
Jahan Habib,
Aye.
Michael McNeely,
Aye.
Amelia Aboff,
Muted. Aye.
and Michael Capuano.
Aye. We are officially adjourned. So think in the next several weeks about when and where you would like to have a planning board social gathering. So we can all be in touch. And I recommend that we obviously invite Lynn, who was unable to join us this evening, as well as Steve and Dan and Andrew and Emily and Sarah if she wants to come, and Risa. We can all shoot her a text and get the gang back together.
Yeah, Rice's still in the staff group chat. So
I was gonna say she better be.
yeah. Mm-hmm.
Good. Awesome, everybody. Have a good night.
Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good night.